We are live at the Kannico headquarters today. I'm Kirsten Stevens with the Kannico Agency, and I'm here with Carrie Howell, one of our senior consultants here. Carrie is actually managing director of our nonprofit leadership division here at Kannico. So we are tapping into her expertise today for our Ask the Expert series. So thank you so much, Carrie, for sharing your knowledge with us.
Oh, I'm so excited to do this. It's so fun.
I know, and today we've got some interesting things to talk about. So we really want to talk about the pain points of running a nonprofit organization. And I know there are many, but one of the areas that we know we don't talk about enough and we really need to dig into, it seems like fundraising always takes priority, development, but we don't, board issues,
Right.
We just don't talk enough about staffing and organizational culture. And I think that's something that we really need to talk about today. So why don't you tell us a few things that come to mind immediately when you think of nonprofit pain points and we're talking about staffing issues. What does that make you think of?
You know, it's so funny. I think that when people get into this business, they think, oh, you work for a nonprofit. That's so fun and cozy and everything feels good all the time.
Yeah.
And from my experience as an executive director, people forget that there's a huge HR component to this. Whether you have one staff member or you have a team of 50, how important it is that you still are following HR guidelines. Now I know that because most nonprofits that are smaller are going to have under 50 employees, there's still guidelines that you have to be careful about. And that means having someone on your board that's an HR attorney, making sure your handbook is up to date. Even if you have a staff of 5, your handbook still needs to follow guidelines.
Well, let me ask you a question on that. How do I know if I need a handbook? What if I run a nonprofit and I have one employee?
Right. Well, I think I would say that's going to be, once you get more than one person, you need to have a handbook.
Okay.
So I would think that's best practice. And it sounds crazy because people think, oh, it's so time consuming. Also, people would think because they may live in an at-will state for employment that they don't need to, I can fire them at will for any reason.
Yes.
And that doesn't necessarily mean that you couldn't get sued. Also, a common question that needs to go into their HR practices, which also follows their board, is making sure they have the right insurance coverage. And you might think you only have one other staff member that you would never get sued, but you would be surprised how often things can happen where things go awry and there's no coverage and now your nonprofit is closed.
So are we talking mostly liability insurance, or do you think that the directors and officers insurance plays a role? How important are all of these?
Yeah, I think directors and officers is number one. It's
Okay.
funny when I talk with growing organizations or a new board member coming on, they'll say, do they have directors and officers? Like if it's somebody that really knows their stuff and they're wanting to come onto an active board, that's a question they should be asking.
Right.
Because they know they can be personally sued, they're personally liable once they take on that responsibility. I think the key with this is that it's still a business.
That's right.
And we have to remember that there's the feel-good component, but you have to surround yourself with people. You may be the visionary as the founder, but you have to surround yourself with people who have the business mindset, the banking mindset, the HR mindset, the legal aspect. How often do we get calls and people just have a really great idea, and it's wonderful, but we kind of cringe when we realize they've been open for 5 years and they don't have different components that they need. So I think take that as serious as well.
Okay.
That once you have more than one person on your team outside of yourself, you need to have some policies in place to protect yourself and to give them some leeway.
And so if you're running a small operation and you think to yourself, well, I don't have an HR person, I don't have a staff member that handles those areas, how would someone know where to go or what resources there might be, or how are there ways that they can figure out on their own what they need to put in place?
Right. Well, absolutely, you can of course Google it and get samples of handbooks.
Okay.
I find though that even once you get that sample, be careful what the date is. Be careful because the laws change every year.
Oh, yes.
Talk to someone like us who can connect you with an HR specialist who works just in nonprofit HR, which is a very different breed than working for a larger 50-plus company. Also, ask people in your community. Most big companies have an HR person. They may be willing to look at your handbook for free. Again,
that's a great idea.
Still make sure your board members sign off on it because there's still that risk. You want to make sure they have followed a nonprofit law.
So wait, you're saying that I'm going to create some policies and procedures. I'm going to make sure I've got my HR handbook, and I need my board to read these documents, approve them, and adopt them.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And the big reason for that is they are responsible. They have the fiduciary responsibility, but they also are the ones, along with the ED, they're the ones that could get sued.
That's right.
And they should be asking to see these kind of policies. Now, we're not talking about them eventually when you get bigger. We're not talking about them looking at every policy of bathroom breaks and smoking breaks. But, we are talking about high-level things that
philosophically, when we're talking about
FMLA, taking time, a long-term leave, military leave, jury duty, all these things are the things that you think this person's your really good friend and you're a founder and you've hired this wonderful person to work with you, and then all of a sudden they have jury duty and they're like, well, I want to get paid. Well, I don't know. Should I pay you? What do I do?
Right.
Those are the kind of things, the more you can pre-plan things of that nature, the more you're going to have positivity that's being able to do the things you want to do.
Absolutely. So, and so in the last few weeks, the beginning of January, is there anything that's bubbled up that you think, wow, this is a huge staffing pain point? Is there anything that comes to mind that you think, you know what, I'd really like to talk about this, or I really want to bring it up, or it's something that maybe we just don't pay enough attention to? Is there anything that comes to mind?
Well, I think there's such a, right now, if you are on LinkedIn or any other social forum, you know that they're always talking about giving feedback to your staff, and now is it chronic and I say chronic because sometimes it's too much, sometimes it's too little, and I think that going in as an executive director or a founder or a little bit of both, you have to go in deciding, how am I going to review my staff, even if it's 2 people. And I think when you close out the year, and some people do reviews annually in January or all at one time, they haven't really gone into this with a plan of how am I reviewing my staff. So I think it's a good idea at the first of the year, with all the things they have going on. We're not pretending like they're just sitting there doing nothing, waiting on this. With all that they have going on, they still, like a business, have to review their staff, review them properly, review them from what the job description says, not just what you feel good about. But I think that's a common thing that people get frustrated about. So then they go to their higher level board, and they are maybe from the banking industry, and they're used to a very rote job evaluation process. And so then there's just frustration.
Right.
And they're thinking, oh, you evaluated because she came to work on time? Like, we're higher than that.
How are we gauging performance success?
Right.
Yeah.
So those need to be set up earlier on than later. Because people forget those are, it's kind of the same situation as the founder syndrome, when people come in and they're the founder and they've gotten a couple of family members on the board and maybe someone else on the board to kind of even things out, and then all of a sudden they realize they didn't bring anyone on to fundraise, and now they've got to ask some people to step off the board. So think ahead of time, and don't wait till it's a problem. And don't say we've never had a liability clause, a liability issue, so we don't need insurance. So gosh, I could go on, but I think in the first of the year is a great time to, even if this is overwhelming, start a checklist of what you want to accomplish this year on your HR side. Don't feel like this has to all be done in January.
I love that. So my 3 takeaways from what we talked about, and I want you to correct me if I miss anything. HR manual. So think about your HR manual, and can it be simple? Is there like a range? Could I just have the most basic to get started, and then later, as I get more sophisticated, I can? Yes, right?
One thing I would add to that too is to make sure any of your team members sign off on that handbook. I've seen some liability issues where someone says, oh, I was working out the 2015 handbook, and someone else says, I've never seen the 2017 handbook. And so it's
good point.
Yeah, I mean, you think it's such a small thing, but if you're in a court of law, they're going to say, oh, well,
which one?
How do we know she ever got it? So getting signatures.
So getting signature on the HR manual.
Right.
Okay, I love that. So we're HR manual. Second thing would be insurance. Make sure that you've got the insurance policies that you need.
And it's not that expensive. People think D&O is very expensive. That's directors and officers. It's not as expensive. It's much cheaper than a lawsuit.
And well worth it. Right?
100%.
Yes. And 100%. I think you become more attractive to potential board members if they know that you have D&O insurance.
Absolutely.
And then the third thing that I took away from you was evaluations. And I know that sometimes evaluations coincide with your hiring date. So maybe in January what you're doing is mapping out when is that evaluation going to take place. Depending on what your mechanism is, some people do self-evaluations and then a joint one. Okay, so maybe at the first of the person's anniversary month, you ask them to start working on their evaluation of themselves, and then you set a date for when you're actually going to sit with them. But calendaring that out, right? So that you know well in advance what's happening throughout the year. Your employees know what to expect, which I think managing expectations is always such an important thing as well.
Absolutely.
So did we capture the 3 main things?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
Anything else?
Great.
any other thoughts that you have for us?
No, I think you actually just gave a really good closing one with HR issues as expectations. I find myself over the years learning to be an over communicator because I don't think you can communicate too much on what you're expecting from your team.
I agree.
And I just think that's a huge one.
Yeah.
And I think for people watching, just don't get overwhelmed by all of these because it can seem like, especially if you're a solo person right now and you're raising money, you're trying to get a board, you're trying to HR, what? I've never even thought of that. But I would say, really and truly be strategic in your own planning of when you want to get this done. Doesn't mean it has to be now. So don't be overwhelmed by one more thing to do. But surround yourself with people who want to help you do these things. That's key. And that's why the board is so helpful.
That's right.
So,
well, thank you so much for sharing
you.
your expertise.
Thank you.
Carrie Howell, who's our Managing Director of our Nonprofit Leadership Division, with us today with her expertise. Thank you. And we just want to remind you that you can join our community forum by Kannico on Facebook. Post your main pain point or your staffing issue or a question, and hopefully one of us can address it, or someone in the community maybe can give you some feedback on that. And we're just so excited that we've launched this forum, and we're here to help in any way we can. So thank you so much for joining us.